Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. So today's chapters are Judges chapter 4 and Mark chapter 3. Now some of you are going to look at me and think, Grant, aren't you a little confused standing in a nice jacket in an iron shed? Well, the reason I'm in my nice jacket is that I've just come back from the City Hall speaking to political and religious leaders about what's happened in the past, hearing stories about running battles, the police, the army, etc. And that's pretty much what our texts are about today. And then this represents the captivity that Jesus speaks about a little later. It'll become apparent in a moment. So Judges chapter 4. Israel finds himself in captivity under oppression again because once again they had followed other gods. And Deborah rose to the surface. Now remember, this was a disobedient nation at the time, and the men had turned their back on God, and this godly woman Deborah takes the position of leadership, and God says to her, call Barak. He's the military commander. Tell him to take 10,000 men and go and take out Jabin and his army. Well, Barak says, and I can't help reading it with this whiny sort of tone. He says, I'll only go if you go with me, type thing. And she says, okay, very well. If you want to behave like that, I'll come with you. I'll ride on your chariot. But a woman is going to get the glory and the acknowledgement for having defeated this particular army. And so there's a mighty battle one there, and the leader of the army goes into this woman's tent. She pretends to look after him, gives him some milk, covers him with a blanket, and then drives a tent peg straight through his head. Now, this story evokes a whole lot of questions. One, it's an amazing account of a very courageous woman. And there will be other chapters when we look at the role that God has for women and men in marriage, etc. But in this particular one, we've got to understand the example. The men were godless. They'd wimped out and they were worshipping other gods. Here's a godly woman. This is the message from this particular account. Godly women can lead ungodly men. Godly women can lead scared men. Godly women can speak when God speaks to them. And godly women are able to show courage when all about them are flaying. So I trust you ladies are encouraged by this chapter. We'll pick up the real heart behind Deborah tomorrow in tomorrow's reading. But let's move now to Mark chapter 3, which is the account of Jesus healing again on the Sabbath, a shriveled hand. And then the Pharisees plotting to kill him because he's breaking their Sabbath. And the crowds are gathering around him and they feel like they're losing their grip as the spiritual heads of their nation. Jesus then appoints his 12 disciples. They gather around with him. And the disciples were now walking with Jesus, and they had no time to even eat because of the massive crowds that were coming around them. And his family said, look, he's losing his mind. Let's come and relieve him. And his opponents were saying it's by the prince of demons that he drives out demons, because he'd been preaching the gospel and driving out demons. And then Jesus said this to them. He told this parable. He said, how can Satan drive out Satan? In addition, he says, if a kingdom is divided against itself, how can that kingdom stand? And if Satan opposes himself, how can he stand? His end is come. In fact, no one can enter a strong man's house by first not tying him up. Then he can plunder the strong man's house. What's Jesus talking about? Look at this iron shed that I have here. He's telling a parable. He's telling a story of people who've been held captive by a very strong man. And they're under his dominion. They're under his rule. And Jesus says, this is what you've got to do first. You've got to break into that house. You've got to take out that strong man. Once you've taken him out, you can free those who've been captive by him. Jesus was talking about himself. He was saying that he was going to plunder, tie up Satan, destroy Satan. And then those who were held under the grip of Satan were going to be freed. And he was saying that that's how I am able to set people free who are demon possessed, because I have control. I have tied up their boss, and so I can set them free. That's how he's explaining demon possession. And then lastly, when his mom and brothers say, come call my son out here, it's time for him to go, Jesus looks around and he says, hey, just mom can wait for a moment. Whoever is basically doing what I do and saying what I say are my brothers and sisters. And so this is not Jesus dishing his family. No, he looked after his mom. Even in his death, he looked after his mom. No, this is Jesus getting the priority right, putting him at center of our lives. Well, I trust as you read these texts, they mean something to you.